discuss a few articles which are related to one another. I've been looking up some information to try and make a basis for the video, and the subject I want to talk about. I'll call it Feminist Victimhood, for want of a better term. So basically, the first article I'm going to discuss comes from the Washington Post, I believe it is. Yeah, the Washington Post. And this is by Michelle Goldberg, published February 20th, so that's today actually. Feminist writers are so besieged by online abuse that some have begun to retire. And the sort of image shows a woman kind of in a corner pushing off this, like, looks like a sort of contingent of hundreds of little arrows. The idea being that there's a huge amount of abuse of feminists online. Well, the article goes on to explain. I don't have time to read it all out, but just so you know, I'm not bullshitting. I'll put the link below. Basically, the article goes on to describe that online feminists have had to deal with a lot of threats, threats of rape, threats of violence. Some have had to leave their homes, and she goes on to chronicle that there's a paradox, and that, in her opinion, on one hand, there's never been so much demand for feminist voices, for example in the pop world, like Beyonce and Taylor Swift. On the other hand, there's a huge amount of backlash against online feminists, to the point where some have regretted using their own name. And the article goes on to talk about that, basically. And I have no doubt that some of the things that she is saying there is true. Anyway, I decided to look up a few feminist websites just to try and get first-hand basis, rather than looking at, you know, feminist said this, feminist said that. I thought I'd go to feminist websites directly, so I went to Jezebel. Now, it's not a case of, you know, all men are bastards, and they sort of come out directly with that, but there is unquestionably overtones there of an anti-male bias, unquestionably. A lot of their articles are basically about female victimhood versus the patriarchy, and there's articles there that are about that are very negative in its representation of men. You know, I've always considered that feminism gets away with things that other ideologies and movements would not get away with. Any other movement that was to sort of scapegoat an entire group of people would be called a hate movement, and rightly so. You know, if it's a white supremacist group that blames all immigrants for whatever, if it's you know, if it's a far-right group that blames all Muslims, if it's an Islamist group that blames all Jews, etc., 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 all of those sort of movements would be described as hate movements. But feminism seems to get away with scapegoating men, and basically, no matter how subtly they do it, demonizing half the population. There's no other way to put it. I'll give you an example. When that viral video, 10 hours of walking around New York City as a woman, was going around, one criticism that came up regularly was that that was a case of cherry picking some incidents that were inappropriate. By extension, that went around feminist circles to say, "Oh, look how hard life is as a woman. Look at all these perverted men." There was zero attempt to make the point that most men are not like that. There was zero attempt to recognize that not all the exchanges in the video were perverted. Some were inappropriate. I'm not going to say they weren't. But that is exactly the sort of thing. We'll put it this way. If you have like a video by a white person and it was sort of saying, "Oh, look at how all black people are in gangs," it would be slammed as racist because it was making a generalization. If it was about Jewish people making money, it would be slammed as anti-Semitic because it feeds into conspiracy theories. Somehow, feminism seems to get away with focusing on a group of people, men, and saying they're all perverted. What that video didn't show was that she very likely walked past dozens of men in New York City who didn't say a word. So that, to me, is a glaring example of the distortion of modern day feminism. So this article is sort of using a victimhood mentality, like, oh, look how terrible it is, these feminists are under siege. Well, my response is that I'm not disputing that there is abuse out there that goes beyond valid criticism. I have no doubt that there are pathetic people online who will make threats, which in most cases they are too cowardly to carry out. You know, it's a pretty pathetic thing. I don't care what someone's opinion is. I think making threats online crosses the line. So, to men out there who are making rape threats against feminists, I unreservedly condemn them. It's wrong. Okay? No ifs, buts or maybes. It's wrong. I'm someone who's critical of contemporary feminism. I'm saying that's wrong. It's my responsibility as a human being to say that, because it is wrong. So this is not about making excuses for that. What I take issue with is the distortion. Because what that article seems to be driving at is that all critics of feminism are these aggressive misogynists who want to keep women down. That is so wrong. The article doesn't bother mentioning that some of the harshest critics of feminism are women. Now, women are hardly going to threaten to rape other women, are they? Has zero mention of the group Women Against Feminism. And basically it's just tapping into the classical old victimhood mentality. Because by using this cloak of victimhood, they can then sort of claim moral credibility by saying that, you know, we're the victims, therefore we are right. And I really have a problem with this because it breaks down any debate that is going to happen. There is no debate, basically, when it comes to third way feminism. There's basically no debate to be had, because any attempted debate is presented as being misogynistic. Now, like I said, I'm not disputing that there is genuine misogyny out there. And to those guys who think that threatening to rape a woman, I don't care who she is, will help, you know, in the debate against feminism, you're idiots. Not only idiots, you're a disgrace, and you should be facing criminal charges. But again, this article's hypocritical because it utterly fails to mention that feminists are pretty guilty of bullying in their own right. Try to go into any feminist forum pretty much and have a dissenting view and see what happens. If you're not censored, then you will be utterly lambasted with ridicule, with slandering. If you're a man, they'll tell you that you have a small penis and you live in your parents' basement. This is the sort of things that feminists get away with. And as soon as the tables turn on them, it's like, oh, we're the victims of patriarchy. This is bullshit. Utter bullshit. Feminists today have immense freedom of expression. You know, what I see here is isolated cases where, yes, there has been cases of abuse, and like I said, I condemn it. But that will be minuscule compared to the massive level of criticism that is out there. Now, this article seems to be basically saying that all criticism of feminism is abuse. And that to me just shows once again, this is a movement that seems to be cloaked in this protective sort of, you cannot criticize it attitude. I really believe that. I really believe that I can't understand why it is that this is the one movement that seems to think it's above criticism. It is profoundly arrogant, and it's just really nauseating because the truth is so different from what that article is trying to present. Yes, it's talking about the abuse that's happening, and I'm not disputing that, but the distortion is that they're saying what that article is getting at is that there exists this giant backlash against feminism which is entirely embodied by abuse and rape threats. That is absurd. I have made probably at least a dozen videos about feminism, most of them critical. Not once have I threatened anybody, and nor will I. It's stupid. Not only is it stupid, it's wrong. I wouldn't like to be threatened. That isn't how you win debates in any context. I know they're irritating, but it's still morally wrong to threaten a woman. Even if she is a hateful feminist, it's still, you don't get any credibility for that. It's outright wrong. But this is just rank hypocrisy, because if you look at the sort of bullying of other women that feminists constantly engage in, it's a bit rich for them to be crying tears, because look at the treatment of female celebrities who say that they're not a feminist. The movement that claims to be all about women's choices then slams, demeans, slanders and ridicules women who do speak out against it. In fact, I've just read another article which is interesting. This one is by Octavia Sheepshanks. Not sure if that's a real name or not, but first year philosophy student at the University of Cambridge. And this is in the HuffPost Young Voices United Kingdom version. Man-hating feminism is more than just a myth. Anyway, this article, she starts off by saying she identified as a feminist because she believed it was about equality between men and women. But she concludes that the only reason I'm not reading it all out is because it's long. I'll put a link to both articles. But it concludes that it is vital that women guilty of such alienation, that is, attacking other women, swallow their pride and reflect that men should be permitted to have opinions just like them. Feminism has a severe image problem, and if this is to change, it must present itself as an all-encompassing movement. Well, that's absolutely true. I don't know if she still identifies herself as a feminist, but it is good that moderate feminists are starting to realise this and starting to speak up, and in many cases they have altogether abandoned that description of themselves because they don't want to be associated with such a thoroughly nasty movement that claims victimhood, yet constantly stirs up negativity against half the human race. Can anyone really deny this? Male feminists, you guys, I've no doubt you have some good principles about egalitarianism, but if you're a male feminist and you're silent about the misandry within the movement, then basically I just regard you as a tool. Sorry to be sharp, but that's it. You say you're free thinking and you're not sort of subscribing to the macho culture that you think the patriarchy is, but are you really being independent? My question to male feminists is, are you really going to tell me that you can go onto a feminist forum and honestly have your own opinions that aren't entirely subservient to how you think feminists will feel about it? Female feminists? Because hardcore feminists won't even accept male feminists. I'm talking about the women group. Yeah, they spell the name differently. W-Y-M-E-N, I believe it is. Because they regard women as a subjugation term of men. These are people who are so bitter and so paranoid that they don't realise what an utter joke and a caricature that they have become. Now, this wouldn't be a problem. We could just laugh at them, as all hate movements should be laughed at, but the problem is they are quite a problem. Now, I've said before and I'll say again, I don't believe every feminist is a man-hater. I've never argued that. But I do stand by 100% my criticism of the way Western third wave feminism has developed, the way it has become. I won't deny it, I hate it. I hate the division that it causes. I hate the fact that it constantly slanders my gender. I hate the fact that it distorts. I hate the fact that it claims that suffering is it is exclusively female. Now, why the hell should these views not be challenged? So this Washington Post article, if it was to make the point that this abuse is occurring, however, it isn't all anti-feminists or all critics of feminism, then I think, okay, it's a balanced report. But it's not a balanced report. It's just feminist propaganda, trying to say that because there is examples of abuse, that's somehow the whole picture. Now, I'm sorry for those women who've had to go through that. No one should have to face threats just for having an opinion. But guess what, feminists? The same applies to those who disagree with you. And frankly, there are a lot of nasty girls' clubs, to put it one way, who try to shut down and bully other women. And I'm so sick of it. You know, it's well known that third wave feminism is anti-male, but something that is increasingly also being exposed is that it is actually incredibly anti-women as well. It's got nothing to do with free choice. It's all about their very narrow outlook on how women should think. If I was a woman, I would find that incredibly patronising. It's no more patronising, I mean, it's no better, actually, than if you have an aggro man saying that all men should be tough and whatever. And there are some men like that. There are some men who try to dictate to other men how men should be. And I'm just as critical as that. I'm all for free self-identity. But I'm sick and tired of narrow, odious, hypocritical little movements that stir up hostility, stir up negativity, then have the audacity to claim victimhood when people actually start defending themselves and saying, no, the problem is yours. So the Washington Post article is a distortion. Anyway, I'll put the link to both articles, let you decide for yourself. In all of these videos, I'm not looking for people to agree with me. I appreciate if people do, and it's great if people do. But, you know, I welcome different views. Unlike feminists, I'm not going to censor it. Which is another point. You know, try having a different view on most feminist forums. You'll be shut down. You'll be shut up. You'll be told, especially if you're male, that you are a misogynist pig who lives with his parents. And basically it comes down to this: because they cannot come out with a valid argument when their hypocrisy is presented to them, they resort to childish abuse. So I'll put both articles and let you decide for yourself. But basically I just don't buy this victimhood mentality. No women in the world have more freedom than women in most Western countries. So I find it almost laughable that Western feminists can actually claim a victimhood mentality in this day and age. Does it mean things are perfect for women? No, it doesn't. But their lie is that only women have issues. I think that is utterly unforgivable, because it is, sorry, I'm still talking here, but you know, this is all valid. Any movement that seeks to present the other as privileged, as the oppressor, it's basically, it's toxic, it's divisive. I really don't see any difference between what feminists are doing and what far-right groups do in terms of their rhetoric about immigrants. Like, immigrants are coming and taking our jobs, they're destroying our way of life, there's a white genocide. Now, any free-thinking person can see that this is a massive distortion on their part. Well, feminism's no different. Feminists argue that only women struggle. Feminists argue that there's this massive patriarchy that constantly puts them down. In my opinion, it is not only valid, but important to challenge this ideology, because hardcore feminists actually believe in their mind that they're living in a bubble, that they are above criticism. And I suspect that some of this so-called abuse is no more than people disagreeing with them. I'm not saying that there isn't abuse out there, there is, because there are pathetic losers online who make threats against people they don't like. And I will say that about anyone on any subject. It's wrong. But it absolutely, absolutely does not present the whole picture, and that's what I really take issue with in that article. And I'll put it below this. You can decide for yourself.